What's up YouTube, and welcome back to the Anabolic Outpost. Today I have a recipe review for you guys, reviewing the blueberry protein shake from Greg Doucette's Anabolic Cookbook 2.0. If you haven't realized it already, I do plan to do several more recipe reviews specifically from this Cookbook 2.0. For several reasons, one of them being which that I've enjoyed all the recipes in this cookbook that I've made so far. However, there are definitely some minor things that I would tweak when making these recipes, and making them for the first time on camera is a great way to express my ideas I have for how you can change and add to this recipe. So for all of these reviews, this one and in the future, I will be continuing to make the recipe as the cookbook describes, and giving my recommendations for how I would change it for next time throughout the video. Today's recipe, the blueberry protein shake, is incredibly easy to make, as it should be. It's supposed to just be a simple go-to protein shake recipe. There aren't many ingredients involved in this, so let me just quickly go over what he calls for. The first ingredient listed is protein powder. Doesn't specify a flavor, so I'm just going to go with the classic vanilla. The next ingredient is almond milk, and I am using fat-free milk, although I have substituted it for several recipes in the past before without much of a difference. Next ingredient is xanthan gum. You could also use guar gum. And you will need frozen blueberries, and you will also need ice. So as you can imagine, the process to making this is pretty simple. Just throw all the ingredients in the blender, set to blend for 1 minute, and scrape the sides of the blender to ensure all the ingredients are blended. Pretty much some standard blending procedure, although I did need a little bit more than 1 minute, but you should be able to know what texture you are looking for in your shake. As I was talking there, I just added in the xanthan gum, and it only calls for 1 gram, which is definitely a little light for Greg's recipes, but it's just a shake after all. It's not supposed to be super fluffy like ice cream. And then after that, I'm throwing in my scoop of protein powder, measuring that out at 33 grams. I'm pouring up that milk now, measuring it out at 90 grams, which is definitely very light on the milk to not even get a full cup in there, which is a full 8 ounces. Seems kind of odd, but we're rolling with it. And lastly here, I got my pre-measured out frozen blueberries, which I'm going to dump in now. The recipe calls for 45 grams. And while I do still have to add the ice to this, I'm just going to go ahead and give it a blend right now. As making anything anabolic with ice in there, I always like to add the ice last for maximum coldness potential. I had only blended it for a minute or so, and it seems to be a decent consistency for now. It barely even budges when you flip the blender over, so I guess that's a good sign for a Greg Doucette recipe. It is looking a little light as expected, but the xanthan gum isn't even fully mixed in with the ice yet, so we'll see. And speaking of ice, like most of the recipes in his book, it doesn't specify how much ice to put in. And for myself, I just grabbed a few cubes, probably only about 50 grams. As you may or may not know, I don't like a lot of ice in my anabolic ice cream style recipes. For me, it just dilutes the flavor, and it's not like I'm getting any more filled up on ice. Definitely an unpopular opinion in the anabolic community. But for something like this, I don't want a lot of ice in there anyway. I got the shake all blended up now. You can see that it has rose a little bit with the xanthan gum in there, so that is good. It is a decent serving size now. And pulling this blade out from the blender itself is definitely interesting to watch, as typically it taking a while to get out of the blender means it's incredibly thick, and that's what you want. But this is kind of supposed to be a shake, and I thought it would be a little bit thinner. Maybe I did something wrong along the way, who knows, but it's really not that much thinner than an anabolic ice cream itself. I thought a gram of xanthan gum was pretty light as it is, especially for Greg, but if I were making this in the future, I would probably consider adding a half gram, if even that. It's pretty funny too to get a picture of the thickness for yourself, because the shake isn't even going to the bottom of the glass, it's just sticking to the sides because it's so thick. And I've got to say, my initial thought on the flavor of this was quite positive. I thought the blueberry flavor meshed well with the vanilla in there, and definitely a lot more tasty if you were just mixing protein powder and milk together like a standard protein shake would. But at the end of the day, it all comes back around to the thickness, and it really just felt like I was eating anabolic ice cream. Which is a good explanation for the flavor being a lot better, because there's a lot less ice and xanthan gum in this recipe. Those two ingredients expanded by a lot and definitely dilute the flavor. This recipe definitely does have some potential though, as a great alternative to the standard protein shake like I was just mentioning. A couple of suggestions and things that I were thinking about if I were to make this again. I would probably just completely remove the ice and just add a few more frozen blueberries, as well as adding more milk. And also, like I previously mentioned, just adding a half gram of xanthan gum or even less than that. Those three things just mentioned would not only make the consistency better, but I think it would make the flavor overall better as well. I would also like to mention too that under the recipe there is a little writing for how you can make this Coach Greg style. He basically says that he likes to eat this with a bowl of Smart Pop popcorn and that it's one of his most common evening meals, especially when dieting. In my opinion, definitely not something I would say to my very influenced fan base. As you may imagine, I could definitely see some kids trying to replicate this 300 calorie dinner time meal like Coach Greg is suggesting. But for very few individuals who are directly seeking protein and carbs for various reasons, it's not a bad option, especially if you're in a pinch and you're just thinking about skipping a meal. This will give you somewhat decent nutrition for very little time and effort. Aside from that though, I could vouch for a protein shake and a bag of Smart Pop popcorn being a very tasty combination. And for my final rating of this recipe, I'm going to go ahead and give it a 5.7 out of 10. I'll also leave you with the macro breakdown for this recipe. In total, it will have 25 grams of protein with 14 grams of carbs and 3 grams of fat for a total of 185 calories. And that's all I got for today's video. If you did have any questions or were confused about anything as far as making this recipe goes or the review itself, leave a comment down below and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Other than that, if you did find this tutorial and review helpful today, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you for watching and I will see you in the next video.